Welcome to the YouTube channel for my new book, Seed of Israel, DNA Guide to Tracing Your Jewish Ancestry, available now on Amazon in eBook and paperback versions. The links are below to order your copies. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button to receive more videos like this on the Seed of Israel YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to explain why political activist Linda Sarsour was wrong. She was wrong when she tweeted that Jesus was Palestinian and that Bethlehem was in Palestine. I'm then going to discuss the possible origins of the Radhanites, the medieval Jewish merchants. Finally, I'll put forward a possible explanation for the genetic bottleneck in the Middle Ages that reduced the Ashkenazi Jewish population to just 350 people. My theory is that a possible explanation for that drastic reduction in population is due to the series of Crusader Massacres along the Rhineland. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So let's get started with the news about Linda Sarsour and the latest controversy. Now, political activist Linda Sarsour is certainly no stranger to controversy. The Women's March co-founder and Palestinian American has faced accusations of anti-Semitism. And I'm not going to go into the previous accusations. You can do a quick Google search and find out what the controversy is surrounding Linda Sarsour and why there's such a visceral reaction from the Jewish community and from the pro-Israel community to some of the things that she has said. She's a supporter of the BDS movement, for example, the Boycott, Divestments, and Sanctions movement, which seeks to delegitimize and ultimately destroy Israel. So that's one example. But don't want to get too much into that. You can do a Google search on Linda Sarsour, and there's a whole history there. But the latest controversy comes from a couple of tweets in which Sarsour claimed that Jesus was a Palestinian and that Bethlehem and Nazareth were in Palestine. Sarsour is wrong to appropriate Jesus as a Palestinian, and she needs to pick up a history book or look at a map of the region during the time of Jesus. It's really not hard, Linda. You know, I did a quick Google search and I found a map of Israel during the time of Jesus. Guess what? There's no Palestine. Jesus was not, these are the facts, okay? We have to point this out. When somebody puts out lies, we have to counter them with the truth, okay? And this is why I wasn't originally going to post this on this video, but I felt I had to say something about it. Jesus was not a Palestinian, and Bethlehem was not in Palestine, if you were listening, Linda. Jesus was a Jew from Judea. Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, was in Judea. Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, was in Galilee. Jerusalem, where Jesus died, was also in Judea. The Romans renamed Judea to Palestine in 135 CE after defeating the Jewish rebellion known as the Bar Kokhba Revolt. That was more than 100 years after Jesus. Again, I will repeat that. Judea was renamed to Palestine by the Romans more than 100 years after the time of Jesus. Okay, enough of that. I think the point came across. Hopefully you are watching this, Linda. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Radhanites. The Radhanites were Jewish merchants who were active during the early Middle Ages. There are two theories about their possible origins. One of them traces them to the Middle East and one of them to Europe. And I'm going to briefly talk about the Middle Eastern hypothesis and also the hypothesis about the European origin. And this is taken from Wikipedia. The several etymologies have suggested the word Radhanite. Many scholars, including Barber de Maynard and Moshe Gill, believe it refers to a district in Mesopotamia called the Land of Radhan in Arabic and Hebrew texts of the period. Some maintain that their center was the city of Ray, or Rages, Rhages, in northern Persia. Still others think the name possibly derives from the Persian terms Ray, meaning way or path, and Dan, one who knows, meaning one who knows the way. English language or Western sources added the suffix "ite" to the term, as done with ethnonyms or names derived from place names. That's the Middle Eastern hypothesis. The French and Greco-Roman hypothesis for the origins of the Radhanites were put forward by Cecil Roth and Claude Cahen, among others, saying that basically the Rhone River Valley in France is where Rhodinus, which is Rhodinus in Latin, and Rhodanos in Greek. They claim that is the center of Radhanite activity and was probably in France as all their trade routes began there. And so I'm just going to briefly discuss the Radhanites, a little bit more about the Radhanites. And this is taken from an encyclopedia submission by Brian Gottesman. The Radhanites, Arabic Radhaniya, were Jewish merchant venturers who were active during the early Middle Ages, circa 500 to 100 CE. The meaning of their name is uncertain. Some historians believe that it derives from the Persian phrase Radhan, or he who knows the way, as I stated earlier. Others maintain that the name refers to the Rhone River Valley in France, called Rhodanus in Latin, again as I stated earlier, which is the origin point for most of the roots. Moshe Gill identified the Radhanites with the district of Radhan in southern Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq, which he asserted was their base of operations. Jewish merchants were instrumental in maintaining the Mediterranean Levantine trade routes following the collapse of the Roman Empire and the rise of the Islamic Caliphate. During much of this period, Christian vessels were often barred from Muslim ports, and vice versa. Jewish-owned ships, on the other hand, were seen as neutral parties and thus permitted to trade where they pleased. The name Radhanite, also known as from only a few Arabic sources, the earliest which is, I'm going to leave a link to this so you can read. I'm not going to go over this whole passage here. But the picture we get of the Radhanites from one of the Arabs who an Arabic source from an early Arabic source is of extremely talented and sophisticated travelers. Quote, "These merchants speak Persian, Roman, Greek, Arabic, the language of the Franks, Spanish, and Slav." This Arabic source wrote. The name is Abul Qasim Abu'ad Allah ibn Khordadbi. So that's who I'm quoting from. And he wrote, they quote, "They journey from west to east, from east to west, partly on land, partly by sea." Ibn Khordadbeh described 4 primary trade routes traveled by the Radhanites. All 4 began in southern France. Several centuries before Marco Polo, all 4 routes ended in China, a journey of many months or even years. Ibn Khordadbeh lists the commodities carried by the Radhanites as including spices, perfumes, jewels, silk, and other luxury items, as well as steel weapons. The Radhanites also participated in the lucrative slave trade. At a later video, I'll go into what that means by the slave trade. Who were these slaves? How involved were the Radhanites in this slave trade? The Radhanites and other Jewish traders were highly successful and influential. Jewish merchants received various privileges in the Carolingian Empire and were probably a factor in the Khazars' conversion to Judaism. I'm going to go into that, the Khazars, a little bit later. It was most likely just the elites, the royal elites that converted, not the masses. And genetics proves that, as there's very little Caucasus DNA in Ashkenazi Jews. They were probably pioneers in the field of banking. Medieval Jewish travelers used letters of credit to transport large quantities of money without fear of theft. Some scholars have credited Jewish traders with the introduction of paper making and Arabic numerals from South and East Asia into Europe. The Radhanites may have also founded Jewish colonies along their trade routes. And then it goes into the fall of the decline of the Radhanites, various reasons, which again, I'll leave a link below to that. So anyway, that's a bit about the Radhanites, a little bit of their history, where they possibly came from, their trade routes. And so I'd like to end the video talking a little bit about a possible theory of mine as to why there was this genetic bottleneck that study concluded possibly occurred in the Middle Ages. A genetic study in Ashkenazi Jews published in 2010 in Nature Communications, and I'll link to that study below, found evidence for a genetic bottleneck in the Ashkenazi population during the medieval era between 600 and 800 years ago. This bottleneck that occurred 25 to 32 generations ago reduced the Ashkenazi population to just 350 people. And today's Ashkenazi Jews descend from these 350 people. So basically, we are all around 30th cousins or less, if you are an Ashkenazi Jew. So we're one big mishpucha, which is Yiddish for family. So the study concludes, and I'm quoting from the study here, that there are several periods in the history of Jewish populations when bottlenecks may have occurred. For example, in the Near East before the initial migration to Europe, possibly over 1,500 years ago, during the migrations of Jews from the Near East to Italy after the 1st century AD, or as we would say CE, Common Era, or thirdly, upon the establishment of small communities in the Rhine Valley in the 8th century AD or CE. And fourth, possibly in the 12th century AD, when migrations took place from Western to Eastern Europe. So I'm going to put forward one explanation for this genetic bottleneck: the series of Crusader Massacres of Rhineland Jews. During the First Crusade of 1096, itinerant preachers and German peasants were whipped into an anti-Semitic frenzy and attacked Jews along the Rhineland as the Crusaders were heading down to the Holy Land to take on the Muslims. So these itinerant preachers and German peasants attacked Jews along the Rhineland. They destroyed the Jewish communities in Mainz, Worms, and Speyer. And if you watch one of my previous videos, I talk about how instrumental those three towns were, Mainz, Worms, and Speyer, to the development of the Ashkenazim and the Yiddish, and how the migrations of Italian Jews and French Jews really were instrumental in forming those populations of Rhineland Jews. So I'm going to put forward, so I'm going to end this video with this summary from the book, The Rhineland Massacres of Jews in the First Crusade, Memories, Medieval and Modern, by David Nierenberg. 900 years ago, Crusaders passing through the Rhineland on their way to Jerusalem attacked Jews in towns throughout the region surrounding Heidelberg. Many Jews were killed or converted to Christianity, and many took their own lives in order to avoid baptism. The events themselves occupy a significant place in modern Jewish historiography and are often presented as the first instance of an anti-Semitism that would henceforth never be forgotten, and whose climax was the Holocaust. As Arno Meyer put it in his study of the Final Solution, quote, the attack on the Jews in 1096 set a disastrous precedent, depositing a fatal poison in the European psyche and imagination. Moreover, unquote, moreover, some have seen the text that a number of Jewish communities produced in the aftermath of the massacres as the vessels of a collective memory that gave Jews strength and allowed them to retain their identity throughout a history of tragedies. A collective memory that, in Alan Mintz's words, quote, summed up for throughout a history of tragedies, a collective memory, summed up for modern Jews, the past to be espoused or rejected, unquote. The First Crusade massacres emerge in such scholarship as a focal point in a narrative of Jewish history that asserts the identity of past and present suffering, and that finds its coherence in a teleology of escalating persecution leading to the Holocaust and to Zionist redemption.